Oh, your voice.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, no promise.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
We said it's really extended.
You can choose.
I like the
Krishna Prasaya Yamate Bhakti Prabhupada ki jai. Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parimatacharya Sutta. Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Nitzlila Bhavishta. Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parimatacharya Sutta. Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Goswami Maharaj ki jai. And Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Amacharya Sri Haridas Thakur ki jai. Praise O Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan ki jai. Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Maya Pradhan ki jai. Nandi Munamai ki jai. Lasi Devi ki jai. Riyat Mridanga ki jai. Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki jai. Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Guru. Krishna, welcome everyone. Good idea. Hare Krishna, Mananda and Argelia. Hare Krishna.
Maharaj ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Lord, Premanande Hari
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. Nalinikanta Prabhu has kindly accepted our invitation to speak about his relationship and association with Srila Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. I'm so honored to wear the garland in front of the greatest sages in the world. Those who are eager to hear from Srila Prabhupada, we can count as the most advanced on the transcendental ladder. We copied a few pictures of Srila Prabhupada. There's enough for everybody to take one, so we'll pass the pack around and see where they fall.
There are two different ones.
Thank you for spending some time hearing some of our stories with Srila Prabhupada. Should I give a few introductory paragraphs to the whole journey, or should we just go to 1971? Before you were all born.
It's your inspiration.
Well, I remember those hippie years with fondness, so I'd like to say something. When we grew up, my friend Sulochan is here, thank you, in the 60s, in the tri-state area, from New Jersey, he's from Staten Island. Life as we learned it, or as we grew up, was school, girls, sports, news of the world, and there was no thought of advancement of consciousness or awakening of the inner soul. We were completely in ignorance. So we say whenever we give a talk on knowledge, Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. By the grace of Srila Prabhupada, we've been taken out of that ignorance of bodily consciousness. When Prabhupada came in 1965 and introduced the Hare Krishna mantra to the country, it spread like wildfire, as he said in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And at the time, people were trying to elevate themselves or trying to get out of the alienation that we felt with the dissatisfaction of the material circumstances. Political, religious, economic, whatever the reason. But most people were open to some new experience by the grace of Prabhupada. And in the early days, that took the form of study of philosophy. Like even in high school, we would read books by Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha, and other books on consciousness. And some people took to using drugs was very popular in the 60s. Psychedelics came along. I remember Timothy Leary coming to my college, Rutgers University in New Brunswick, giving a lecture, you know, and holding up, he said, if you want to understand this experience, he holds up a picture of a Moody Blues album called To Our Children's Children's Children. It was like psychedelic music was very popular at the time. And even to this day, I regret that those things are on my mind. But once you go somewhere, you get affected by that association. At least the story was given to me by Rishabdev from Laguna Beach, which was the head of the psychedelic movement because it was the headquarters of Timothy Leary. And a temple was started in Laguna Beach, and Srila Prabhupada went there one day to give a class. And after the class, all the heads or all the psychedelic freaks were talking and asking questions. Prabhupada, have you heard about Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception? He said, no. He said, well, it says that if you take LSD, it opens the doors of perception in your mind. And Prabhupada said, if the door is open, then walk through it. So some of us have a tainted affinity to the fact that some, you know, chemicals opened our willingness to discuss other states of mind. So that being what it was, after Timothy Leary's lecture, I dropped out of Rutgers in my first semester and just hit the road and hitchhiked to California to find my guru, Timothy Leary.
You dropped out, turned on, and tuned in.
That's right. And when I got to LA, it was like, no, this is not where I want to be. You know, so I started hitchhiking back across country, and the person that gave me a ride and picked me up took us and said, we're going to stop in Santa Fe for the night. So we stopped in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he said, we're going to a poetry recital. And it was Allen Ginsberg. Now, if you know the history of Prabhupada, Allen Ginsberg joined Prabhupada in 1965 in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And they chanted Hare Krishna together. And Prabhupada gave him the instruction that wherever you go and do your poetry readings, get them to do kirtan. So after about an hour of, you know, far out poetry, he said, let's have a kirtan. And I turned to the person and said, what's a kirtan? And he brings out a harmonium and starts singing Hare Krishna. And 500 people in the hall were all singing, and there was an overwhelming feeling that came over me in my consciousness and in my heart, you know, that, wow, this was a nice experience. Besides that, this is symbolic. There was a bad itching feeling on my body going on, because I had borrowed a dirty sleeping bag and I caught something. And as we chanted, all that scratching and itching and pain went away. Symbolism, you get the symbolism there, the itching sensation to feel the pleasures of the body turns into pain, and the Hare Krishna mantra wipes that out. So anyway, I got back to the East Coast and dropped in on Ratnaswari's house. And I said, I need a place to stay. We were just, you know, lost in those days, you know, we just hit the road. Anyway, she kindly agreed, and I met a friend of mine who gave me a copy of Bhagavad Gita and said, have you heard about this? This is Hare Krishna. And I said, oh yeah, I heard about Hare Krishna in New Mexico. He said, there's a religion around this mantra. And we didn't know that, but as soon as we found out, we went to a nearby temple in Philadelphia, the ISKCON temple, and started going to the Sunday feast. And after about 3 months, started in October 1970, I remember calling my mom up in New Jersey and said, "Mom, you'll be so happy, I stopped smoking marijuana." And she said, "Well, what's going on?" She said, I said, "Well, I'm chanting Hare Krishna. It's an Indian religion, and it's really, done a lot for me." And she said, "Well, I don't know about your kooky religion, but I'm glad you're off the drugs." So eventually, that's the next year, by January of 71, by March of 71, the devotees in Philadelphia and New York we visited, and we hitchhiked up to Boston with my dog with me and went to the Boston temple. So we were involved with Krishna consciousness. We were doing like 20 rounds a day. And they told us, Prabhupada's coming to San Francisco for Rath Yatra. So we hitchhiked across the country again to go to California to meet Srila Prabhupada. And when we heard Prabhupada speak, we looked at each other and said, "This is not Timothy Leary, this is not Swami Rama, this is not Yogi Bhajan, this is the real thing." It was an ecstatic experience. We stopped at the Berkeley temple and they invited me to go in the van to greet Prabhupada at the airport. And that experience was like thunder, and the whole world just lit up like the spiritual sky being revealed to us. There were about 100 of us in the airport, and this was a common scene around America. Prabhupada's airport arrivals became very well known for their ecstasy and for their enthusiasm. So we were waiting for Pan Am from New York to San Francisco, and all the passengers were coming out one by one, looking around, roaring kirtan going on. And the last person that came off the plane was Srila Prabhupada. He raised his hands and everybody hit the ground. I said, "What are they doing?" We saw Srila Prabhupada, and there was a very tangible experience. Like when you eat a good samosa or something, or when you have a great kirtan, hopefully this is a divine experience. Srila Prabhupada was just radiating. You could see the light coming off of him, and it was his compassion giving mercy to all of us. And it was like, I remember riding home in the van to the Berkeley temple, and all I could see was blue everywhere. I don't know if that a residual from past drug use, or if it was Krishna infusion into my mind and my consciousness. But that was our seeing Prabhupada and feeling ecstatic. Were you at the airport for that, or were you waiting back? Yeah. So a couple of months later, I wrote to Srila Prabhupada. I talked to a devotee. He said, "Well, write him a letter. You're interested." So I was Bhakta Tom, living next door with the fringe jacket and the leather boots and carrying the Martin guitar. I was like a folk singer trying to, be a successful musician. So I wrote to Prabhupada. I sent him the lyrics of my songs about the Vietnam War and craziness, and he wrote me back. And one day, Jayananda, the temple president, came in at lunchtime and said, "There's a letter from Prabhupada." Everybody got real excited. It was like 65 devotees in this little house in Berkeley. And they said, "Who's it to?" He said, "Oh, it's that guy Tom that lives next door." So Srila Prabhupada said basically, I've received your letter about your music and I've seen your songs and everything, but actually, he said, in our Krishna consciousness movement, we have 24 hours engagement in the service of Krishna in so many ways. that will keep you very happy and very engaged in bhakti yoga. He said, when the temple president recommends you, then I will accept you as my disciple. So it was instructive in the sense that if you don't just, hey, pure devotee, here I am, let's have a talk. You know, you bow down and beg for the mercy of his lotus feet. So eventually we got, in just a couple of months, we got initiated. December 7, I believe, 1971. Was it?
November 24, 1971.
Yeah.
I looked up the letter.
Yeah. And those of you who know I do astrology, I'll add that that was one of the very 4 good months of the year for me. But no, that was a wonderful experience. Anyway, after we read that letter, the devotees were coming up to me and saying, Prabhupada wants you to surrender. Come on, man. Join up, you know, move in. So Jayananda took me upstairs with those clippers and just cut. I come down the stairs and Ratna's down there and I think she told me she knew her material life was over. So, you know, we moved in the temple, we lived there for 3-4 years. So the next year, which is 72, big book distribution started. This is something Sulochana has done from the 70s to the present day. Devoted his life to distributing Prabhupada's books everywhere. So as you join the temple and you're a brahmachari, you know, all day long your business is going out and chanting on the street or going out on book distribution. So we started from Berkeley the first cross-country book distribution party. We got one of those red International Harvester vans, filled it up with books, slept on top of the books at night, you know, go into a bathroom somewhere, take showers in the morning, distributed, you know, books all over the country. And our first trip was north. We went to Portland and Srila Prabhupada was there. So I called up the temple president, this is around June or July, and said, can you tell Prabhupada's servant that you're recommending me for Brahmin initiation? Which usually takes a year, you know, but I had been chanting since at least over a year. So he said, and somebody, I think it was Nanda Kumar, took me up to Srila Prabhupada's room and in Portland. And just Prabhupada and myself. It was like, this is scary, you know? It wasn't really scary, but it was like being in the presence of greatness. You've heard people talk about that. That was like, wow. You looking, Prabhupada said, sit down right here next to me. And I look in his eyes and he's living in Goloka Vrindavan. He's not a man of this earth. Like he said about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he was a Vaikuntha man. You could see Prabhupada is absorbed in Krishna consciousness, self-realization, every possible opulence he could possibly have. So he said, he took time with me. He counted on his fingers all 7 lines of Gayatri and had me pronounce each line 10 times. So that takes 5 minutes to do that, you know. And then he grabbed a Brahmin thread, which was on the table, and he leaned over towards me. He was like this close to Prabhupada. And he threw the thread over me so that it would go over my shoulder down to my right side, being very careful not to touch me. I noticed that. You know, he knew that he was benedicting people who are, you know, iffy. I'm worse than iffy, but maybe some of you are iffy. You know. So he was very careful about that, Paka. And then he said to me, he's staring at me like this close and said, I am speaking, are you hearing? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And I always remember that because you know, my mind is all over the place sometimes. And I'm sitting next to Prabhupada and he had to ask, I'm staring at him and he had to ask, are you listening? You know, and he gave me some personal instructions for my dharma in life, which was to read all of his books very thoroughly. I've tried to do that in my life. I'm Capricorn, I keep an account. All the books I've read, I'm good at counting. Anyway, he said, if you want to become Brahman, which is Brahman can be interpreted in certain different ways, but I understood it as if you want to become self-realized, do this. Read all of his books thoroughly. Then he said, I'm speaking, are you hearing? So I always remember that one line and that experience that I'm this guy from New Jersey, dropout, druggie, you know, and he accepted us, he initiated us, he gave us personal guidance, he gave us a house to live in, a family to be with, a full engagement in the devotional service of the Lord. And he did this all over the world. He was just an ocean of mercy, like they say in the songs. And you could feel it, that he doesn't want anything from me, you know. He's giving the greatest gift of love of Godhead. I could use an example. Sometimes we lived in LA and Prabhupada would spend a lot of time there. And he would be asleep maybe from 11 to 1 at night, get up, do his japa, translate his books, go for a walk at 6 a.m., come back to the temple, give a Bhagavatam class at 7 o'clock, and then at 8:30 they would bring him his breakfast. And one day we waited at the bottom of the stairs to get the remnants of his breakfast plate. It was a big plate, like, you know, one of those big things with like 40 kinds of fruit on it. And I noticed that Prabhupada just sucked on a few oranges. That's all he took, you know, and he walked 6 to 7 in the morning every morning, and we were like 24 years old. We could hardly keep up with his pace. It was very hard. He was the military commander, you know, he's like, you can't use Patton as an example, but he was, you know, he was moving really quickly at the age of 73. You know, he came here at the age of 69. I'm 69 now in body, and I'm thinking, can I just get a quiet place in Palm Springs or something? Prabhupada started his mission now, you know. In the later years, at around 1976, 70, 75, 76, 77, we would write to Prabhupada and he'd say things like, I was signed the GBC to take care of this management thing. I just want to write my books. So I saw that at some point he wanted to go into his samadhi, you know, and to finish the Bhagavatam. But, you know, in those early days, he was just going place to place and up all day and all night, seeing people and taking care of his disciples. But that's the first line on my list of men. Okay, so in 1974, after 3 years as a brahmachari, I realized I wasn't lifelong brahmachari material. So we got married. It's a funny story. You want to hear a little anecdote? See, so in those days, you know, in those days, it's just like you can't stay brahmachari, you know, very much longer. You need, you know, a girlfriend or a wife or a woman, and there's no living with girls or going out, you know, for escapade when you're Prabhupada's disciple. So I went to the temple president, and he asked me, who are you interested in? I don't know about that girl. She seems like a good devotee. Okay, so he talked to her, and she said, okay. And then that same day, a letter came from Prabhupada to the San Francisco temple and said, I've seen so many divorces already in the beginning of our movement. Every person that wants to get married, the couple has to associate for at least 30 days before they go and take a fire sacrifice. So within 3 days, that girl said, well, I'm out of here. This guy's a little too heavy for me. So the temple president said, well, what about Ratnaswar? You're friends with her, aren't you? I said, oh, yeah. And then, Krishna arranged it so that my mood of, we had lived together for a year or so in the same room, completely platonic but Krishna changed my mood. I just looked at her and said, yeah, let's do it. So Gaur Purnim will be anniversary number 46. By grace of Prabhupada, not by my own punya, but I got wonderful friends, wonderful wife, wonderful devotee associates, and wonderful people who will sometimes listen to what I have to say, like their good selves. It's all by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord and his devotee, Srila Prabhupada. So we got married, and then in San Francisco at the Justice of the Peace, and then we called her father, and her father said, I'm sending you some tickets. You come here, back to New Jersey. So we went back to New Jersey, and one night when all of her mother and father's friends started coming in, big Italian family. And they'd come up to me with my tilak and my shaved head, and they put an envelope in my hand. And so at the end of the night, I said, what is all this? And I said, this is money. This is tradition to give a gift to the newly married couple. So we went upstairs in our private room, and wow, there's $2,500 here. Let's go to India. So we landed in India on June 10th. Didn't know anything about India. June 10th in India, it's 117 degrees. They opened the door of the plane, and it was like a blast furnace. Oh my God. And Prabhupada wasn't coming to Vrindavan until Janmashtami, which is 2 months down the calendar. I was ready to go home after a week. Radha got really sick. We both got very sick because in those days the water purification wasn't there. There wasn't clean food. We got dysentery, as everybody who went to India in the early days pretty much did. By the time we got home, Ratna had lost 50 pounds in 2 months. Wow. And her father looked at her, looked at me and said, what have you done to my daughter? No. She was like, barely could walk. Anyway, he took her to a very strong doctor who gave her very strong medicine that's not even legal anymore to prescribe. And it cured her. And then when we got better, we both said, I can't wait to get back to India. India with Prabhupada in the summer, there was only about 15 people there. Every morning we'd go on the walk with Prabhupada. Every morning we'd have a class with Srila Prabhupada lecturing. All day long we'd be there taking care of Prabhupada, serving him lunch, bringing guests that wanted to see him. Every night we'd have Nectar of Devotion class. We'd walk down the street. It was like 2 months in Vrindavan of personal association. It was really nice. We did that. I did that at least many years. I always felt like I want Prabhupada's association. I was not an organizational man so much, so I wasn't a big this or that in the movement, but I'd always show up on the morning walk. The GBC would come and say, what are you doing here? I couldn't not go and be with Srila Prabhupada. pastimes in walking with Prabhupada in Vrindavan, San Francisco, Santa Monica. One time we went on a morning walk in Paris on our way to India. Where else? New York. Anyway, one day I remember with Prabhupada in Vrindavan, it was Balaram's birthday. So we're thinking, wow, we're going to hear some real nectar stories today, you know, Balaram and the cowherd boys and everything. Prabhupada started his lecture. Spiritual life begins with understanding that you are soul, you are not the body. And he lectured on that for an hour. Always remember that. And there's one part in, I believe it's the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, where Prabhupada says the real student of the Bhagavad Gita is he who is seeking after self-realization. Not approaching Krishna for money or a good wife or for relief from our material situation. But Prabhupada was always on that platform. There was nothing material really about him, even though he was very practical about material things. So in the next year, 1975, the new Krishna Balaram temple was supposed to open. Can I relate a pastime where Prabhupada blessed me?
Please.
So it's a little, you know, you feel shy to say it, but he gives mercy out. Don't think that anyone is different from anybody else. We're all equal in the eyes of God and in the eyes of Srila Prabhupada. You had that experience with him also, right? That he never, oh, I want to see, you know, this or that. And of course, big devotees got the chance to spend more time with him, but he never cared this or that, who you are. He cares about devotion. He cares about being on the spiritual platform. So they were building the new temple in Vrindavan and supposed to open on Janmashtami 1975. And Prabhupada had invited all the important people of India to come, because he wanted to show them that these Westerners, they're coming by the thousands. I mean, in those days, from 71 to 75, at the Berkeley Temple, there would be 10 new devotees joining every month and 10 others going elsewhere to start new temples. Mm-hmm. It was booming by the grace of Prabhupada's attraction. Anyway, so when we got there in the summer of 1975, the place was half built. There were wood poles everywhere. The ceiling wasn't on. The altar wasn't made. We're supposed to open in 3 weeks. And Ratna and I just looked at each other. So Prabhupada came, and he goes around the temple in the morning. Everybody's silent. Nobody says a word. He's looking. So there were at least 10 sannyasis there carrying their staffs, and so Prabhupada said, took us back inside his office, and he sat behind his desk, and he said, so what are we to do? And everybody was afraid to say anything, except I with the big mouth. I always wanted to talk to Prabhupada. But I was standing behind the first 2 rows, sitting behind the first 2 rows, and 10 of those were staffs. And I went like this. He said, yes, you want to say something? And I said, Prabhupada, we have to delay the opening. He said, yes, you said the right thing. So he gave me the chance even to give advice to him. Who are we? And Prabhupada has given us the chance to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his representative. So this was causeless mercy that he said, this is not our standard. he always thought that if you do something, do it first class. It doesn't have to be, wealthy or opulent, but it should be clean, should be cleanliness, decoration, regularity. What are those 6 things in deity worship? Cleanliness, regulation. Yeah, that's regularity. Yes.
Opulence.
Decoration.
Decoration.
Yeah. He had them in order of importance. I think decoration was the last of the 6.
Cleanliness was the first.
Cleanliness was the first.
Punctuality.
Yeah.
Regularity, yeah. But he said at that time, this is not our standard, some half-constructed thing, to show off the progress of Prabhupada's movement. It would give a bad name to Prabhupada. So they waited 8 months and opened it the next year at Ram's appearance in April. And probably you've seen the picture, maybe Prabhupada doing the first arti.
I was there.
You were there?
Yeah.
Nice.
He was happy?
Super happy.
I didn't go that time.
When he did the arti, and then he, when he got to the fan, I mean, everything he was every single article that he was offering to Krishna Balaram was, meticulously offered. And then when he got to the fan and turned to the crowd and just bathed everyone in sheer nectar, his whole face, his whole countenance, is just in ecstasy. And so he was just waving like this. He just, floods of nectar were just coming out, and you could tell that he put, his life and soul into opening the Krishna Balaram Mandir, and he was directly, serving Krishna and Balaram. There was nothing in between, and it wasn't just it wasn't a ritual. It was like he was in love with Krishna and Balaram. So when he did that, he just, we became happy by feeling his happiness. A little taste of that.
So one time he chastised me, which I'll relate that to, which is when we were there and the temple was half done. We'd wait at his door. The only building one could live in was Prabhupada's little room, which was made of cement. Everything else was just, kind of like these stone caves with, cots on them made with rope, that we'd sleep on at night. And so one morning his servant came out and said, "Get Kartal and Mridanga, Srila Prabhupada wants to have kirtan in the morning walk." So I went over and I got 2 Mridangas, and carried one on each arm and each shoulder, and then Prabhupada came out of his room and I bowed down, and the Mridanga slides off and hits the ground with a whack, really loud, and 100 devotees and Prabhupada are looking at me. I was like, he says, "Just see, we are spending so much time and money to build these Mridangas for our movement, and the carrier is useless. Getting blasted by the spiritual master is much mercy. I was being foolish and I wasn't being careful in my behavior. But there's also a message there in the words, the carrier is useless. Thank you. The carrier is the material body. We are the soul being carried by this material body to different places in the universe. There's no necessity for this material body. It's faulty. It embarrasses us, as I was embarrassed in the moment. So I know he was chastising me, but I pretend to think that, no, actually he was giving me some spiritual instruction. But that was a memorable event. And I've tried to understand in my life since that time, don't try to do too many things at once. Better to concentrate and do what you're doing expertly. And You know that. It's like, don't drive while you're texting. It's very simple instruction. Okay, then we move to Ratha Yatra in Berkeley, 1975. This is an important episode in my life, if I can explain the pastime. So, the Jayananda is a famous devotee. Maybe you've heard of him, Saint Jayananda. Even in ISKCON, they observe his appearance day. He was our temple commander. I spent the first 3 years of my life with him all day long. We'd go to the dump run, taking the garbage down. We'd go to do the radio show, and I'd be playing my guitar and reading the script. We'd go to schools. We'd go to Banana King Louie's at the food market in the San Francisco food market. And there was nothing you could say about Jayananda that wasn't praiseworthy. He was the kind of person that everybody loved. One time after I got married, I realized, okay, we're going to have to pay for an apartment and stuff like that. And the temple president said, well, we've got an opening in the incense business, spiritual sky incense, because Jayananda's giving up his route. So I would take his route going to these different stores that carried our incense, and I'd show up and they go, oh, where's that guy Jim? Everybody loved him so much, and I was like, oh boy, I was a big disappointment when they saw me. So Jayananda was that type of devotee. But one year in 75, after they kicked out my friend who was the temple president, because he was wanting the Sankirtan devotees to eat some avocado sandwiches and salad, and this was not ISKCON protocol. You give them sweet rice and oranges and every kind of thing they want, and they run out the door in the mode of passion. Tatma, who's still my good friend, he was a little revolutionary. They kicked him out. And somebody else took over the temple in San Francisco. That temple in 74, 75 was the best temple experience I've ever seen in the world. Great people, book distribution, Prabhupada pleasing, Ratha Yatra. Anyway, I have great memories of it. Except one year, the new temple president decided to do something different with Ratha Yatra. So one day I went next door to the warehouse and I saw Jayananda building the cart. And they were putting steel wheels on the Ratha Yatra cart. And the next day, a letter came from Srila Prabhupada, which I'll read to you. I hope I brought it. Regarding the Ratha Yatra festival, keep it always gorgeously alive, but do not change the principle. The principle should go on as usual. Yes, it's all right to make something in the park as you have suggested. Why do you want to change the wheels? This is unnecessary. Don't do this. Keep the old system strong. If necessary, repair it. Don't change from this to that. That is your American disease. This is very serious that you always want to change everything. Spoked wheels will never be as strong and hard as the old way. Never do this. So how many times did he say no, no, no? 8 times I counted. So the next morning I go over to see Jayananda and he's welding these wheels together. I said, what are you doing, Jayananda? He said, we got a letter from Prabhupada yesterday that said you shouldn't do these wheels. And he said, yeah, but the temple president told me to do it, so I'm doing it. I said, Jayananda, you're a saint amongst devotees. Everybody looks up to you. If you disobey Srila Prabhupada, who will follow Prabhupada? Don't set this example. He put his thing down and said, "You're right, Nalini, let's go see the temple president." So we saw the temple president, and the temple president goes, "Oh my God, here's Nalini agitating again." And he calls up the GBC in Los Angeles and tells him, Jayananda tells him, "Look, I can't do this. Prabhupada doesn't want us to change. Let's just use the old wheels. We have them in the warehouse. Just plug them in, you know." And the GBC says, "No, I don't think Srila Prabhupada understands. This is mechanics. This is modern technology," something to that effect. "So go ahead with the new wheels and I'll take the blame, if there is to be blame." So Prabhupada comes, he's riding on the cart and the steel wheel cracks. And we sit there for a half an hour while they repair it. Okay. Prabhupada never said anything, but, you know, the temple president comes in that night, we were in Prabhupada's office, and he pays his dandavats and says, "Prabhupada, I'll never disobey you again." Prabhupada goes, The next morning at Bhagavatam class, we read the shloka, and Prabhupada avoids reading the purport, and he immediately starts saying, "Yasya deve para bhaktir yata deve tata guru tashaite katita hyarta prakashante mahatmana." One who has firm faith in God and Guru, that one, Prakash, everything will be revealed to him. Firm faith. And he went into a lecture where the first time I ever heard him say about, you must go through a devotee. And he goes, "And I am a devotee," where he asserted his position. He didn't want to do that. He was very perfectly humble, but he saw how disobedient we were. You know, that we'd even ignore a letter where he said 8 times, "Don't do this." What practically happened, the temple president completely fell down. The GBC was beheaded by his own disciple. Jayananda got leukemia and died within a year and a half. Even Jayananda, you know, I don't necessarily attribute it to that. I attribute it to the fact that Krishna wanted him back so he didn't have to stay for 40 more years with people who would disobey Srila Prabhupada. You know, the guy that helped Srila Prabhupada was murdered. Right? And there is practical, tangible evidence that, you know, if you will flagrantly disobey the instruction of the pure devotee, you're not going to get a good result. But to this day, every ISKCON Rath Yatra cart is steel wheels.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. There was another thing with Berkeley. The San Francisco temple was 455 Valencia Street. Prabhupada visited there several times. The temple president wrote him and said, "We want to sell this and move across the bay and get some property, a more sattvic environment." Prabhupada said, "Don't sell this building. You make the neighborhood good." Yep. Sold the temple, moved over and bought a place in Berkeley. And Prabhupada went there the next year, and he didn't say anything. He was always, you know, accepting whatever we could offer, but I'll always remember that experience, that, you know, don't put somebody, you know, whether it's a temple president or a guide or even a husband, don't put them above the direct order of the spiritual master. This is the first offense against the holy name, isn't it? Mm-hmm. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. So that pastime I remember. One other thing from that Berkeley element, I have a little time yet?
Lots of time.
Yeah, okay.
As much as you want.
This is what time is for.
Yeah. I went out again on the morning walk with Srila Prabhupada in that Berkeley episode. And there was a devotee in Berkeley named Krishna Das, and he was very attached to Christianity and always wondering, am I betraying Jesus? You know? And Srila Prabhupada explained to him year after year carefully that the message is the same. It's devotion to God as a supreme person. It's praying to God. It's rendering service to God. We are just giving full explanation of God and how to approach Him. And after that discussion, it was kind of heavy. You know, you feel like there's a disciple who's a little doubting of Prabhupada or of Krishna. But all of us went through that, you know, whether we're attached to Christianity or Judaism or, you know, drug culture, whatever. We all had to, you know, come to grips with, you know, what place do we want to put Krishna consciousness in our life? Is it our priority? Is Prabhupada our guide and our master? Or are we going to follow to some degree and keep other things going on that we just can't give up yet? If we're like that, do as much punya as you can. As Prabhupada says in the Gita, for those who are not completely pure, this cycle of yajna performances is absolutely necessary. There's one story where the girlfriend told me this personally. There was a disciple of Prabhupada who very engaged for several years in New York. And maybe you told me this story. And he fell down, you know, call it blooping in those days when somebody leaves, and he actually became a Satanist.
Oh.
Was that a story you told me?
Yeah.
And, you know, when he
was a sannyasi.
Was it?
I mean, he was a Prabhupada sannyasi.
Wow. He became a Satanist, and then he got ill. And just as he was about to die, he said, Prabhupada, you're here.
Oh.
Prabhupada came to visit him. And the girlfriend that was watching him, tell me if I'm telling it wrong, she didn't know what he was talking about, but she met a devotee and he showed her a book and she read Prabhupada. And she said, oh.
The girlfriend was also a devotee.
Yeah?
Girlfriend's Malati.
No,
Wow.
Yeah.
Malati, that was after Malati. Other girlfriend.
No.
She wasn't a devotee. He had kicked the devotees out.
Oh, he kicked all the devotees. He wouldn't see the devotees the last 3 days he was in the hospital. In the room in the hospital.
Yeah, well,
And he
anyway.
didn't want to, he consciously, outwardly rejected all the devotees.
But,
But at the end, he was a full-on Satanist. I mean, he was having black masses. He was, you know, see a picture of him. His name is Pritu Putra Swami. And he was a French-Canadian sannyasi. And yeah, so at the end, he was, you know, he just got up like he was, he had really big eyes. He had very large eyes. So he was laying in somewhat like a semi-comatose condition. And then right at the end, he just literally came from a laying position to a sitting position. And his eyes just bulged wide open. And he just said, oh, Prabhupada, you came. And then he just passed away. Wow. The Prabhupada came to him.
the girl didn't know who Prabhupada was, but she told this story to the devotees later. So, you know, whatever degree of Krishna consciousness we can follow is so good for us. And Prabhupada is so appreciative of all the service that you do. You know, and don't get too discouraged if you can't be immediately, you know, go back to Godhead. You you know, but don't make excuses for not trying, right? Otherwise, you might get stuck in a heavenly planet for 10,000 years, you know. Prabhupada's not going through the heavenly planets preaching, you know. He's returned to Goloka Vrindavan with Krishna, as far as I understand. Anyway, so at that morning walk, I said, after the heavy discussion with Krishnadas, I talked to Prabhupada, that Indian man, you asked me to give him a ride home yesterday after your darshan. So I drove him and he took me to an ashram, and we went inside and there were 200 people sitting down by candlelight singing Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It was beautiful, soft kirtan, actually. I really liked it. And Prabhupada was there and he said, oh, why they do not come to our temple? Yeah. The pure devotee of Krishna is 1 mile away, you know, if you really like Krishna. So different devotees chimed in, you know, and said different things. And Prabhupada, just with his regal way, he just waved his hand like this and said, at least they are chanting Hare Krishna. You know, so all the arguments about Christianity or this ashram or this institute as opposed to this Krishna temple, you got the point that Prabhupada came to give the Maha Mantra to everybody. Not that he was interested that, oh, maybe I can collect another 200 disciples. You know, that was the furthest thing from Prabhupada's mind. I never saw, I was with Prabhupada at least 100 times, I never saw him mention money once. I did see him eat a gulab jamun at 9:30 at night. It was in his office in Vrindavan when they were opening the temple that year. It didn't open. And I was cleaning up afterwards and we were, you know, I was bringing a bowl of gulab jamuns out. He said, you, what have you got there? I said, gulab jamuns, Prabhupada. And I offered him, but he took it so beautifully between his 2 fingers. Threw it in his mouth, didn't like, you know, slobber it or anything like it. It was so regal, you know. And I found out a little later that Srila Prabhupada had a minor level of diabetes that he was dealing with. And here he is at 9:45 at night eating gulab jamuns. He was completely above the material condition of his body. You've seen that tape of Prabhupada on his deathbed, and his last words, he's going, Krishna is the cause of everything. You know, his body's not functioning, but he's completely aloof. You know, he's in the Atma, inside the body. If anybody wants self-realization, there's no better source than hearing from Srila Prabhupada and trying to please him and get his mercy. And one more story, okay?
Yes.
When he came to LA in 1976, there was a rush to get the Chaitanya Charitamrita completed and printed. Well, it's 18 volumes. And Prabhupada told the people at the BBT, this must all be completed in 2 months. So that everybody that worked there was on 24-hour shifts. So they would make announcements in the morning after Mangal Arati. Srila Prabhupada is busy working on his books. Do not try to see Srila Prabhupada or ask him a multitude of questions. Only GBCs can talk to Srila Prabhupada. So now I'm thinking, how do I get up there? And I had a friend named Rakshana Das, who was the guard at the bottom of Prabhupada's stairs. And we were good friends. And I said, Rakshana, I have to see Srila Prabhupada, I have a donation for him. You know, it was $15. You know? And he said, okay, Nalini. So one night I was waiting there and all the GBCs came down and Rakshana closed the door, told him I was hiding behind the curtain. I said, come on, Nalini. And Srila Prabhupada, he brought me up the stairs to Prabhupada's room, opened the door. And of course I was afraid because, you know, I'm bothering Prabhupada late at night. He's very busy. I'm a nobody. I'm a temple president from a new temple in Phoenix, and I have a $15 or $50 donation, something. And so he was looking away from the door, out the window, and chanting japa. And Rakshana says, Srila Prabhupada, your disciple is here to see you. And he's turning around slowly, and I'm like, oh. And he turns around, he has the biggest smile on his face. Like I'm the prodigal son who's just returned, to see him. He loved all of us. He loves each of us equally, as no matter what our position is. And he was very happy to see me. And I know Srila Prabhupada, I just had a little donation to give to you, and he said, oh, thank you very much. And I said, I had one question. I was a friend with Balavanta, who had run for mayor of Atlanta 2 years earlier. It was the time when the In God We Trust party was going on, where people were trying to make inroads into politics as Hare Krishnas. I said, Prabhupada, I'm thinking of running for mayor in Phoenix. And he laughed and he said, I don't think this politics is that important. I said, but Prabhupada, I want to do it for preaching. We could get a lot of publicity. Prabhupada said, opened his eyes really. Oh, for preaching we can do anything. So then, so I ran for office. I got out of 100,000 votes, I think I got 1,000, because there was an article on the paper with me with a shaved head and tilak and the dhoti, not a very, popular political personality. So, but Satsvarup, the GBC, sent him a picture of the newspaper coverage. And he wrote Satsvarup back and said, the clippings for Nalinikanta, who is running for the mayor of Phoenix, is a good advertisement, and we are getting good publicity. But be careful that he may not be implicated too much. There is a proverb which states that one should pick up the fish without touching the water. I think you can understand me on this matter. Like the lotus floats above the water of the material world. But, a neophyte devotee, going into politics or trying to be a rock and roll star or trying to make millions of dollars, is a tough thing to handle unless you're, really aloof from the material energy. And what's nice about this letter is he's concerned about my spiritual well-being. He wasn't concerned about making big propaganda. One time I had a discussion with the GBC in LA where I asked him, well, he's training up ISKCON and ISKCON leaders and managers. Do you think, don't you think that this is to train up the small amount of people who will become devotees and help them to set a good example that people can follow? Or do you think that it actually is going to make the GBC the rulers of the 10 corners of the earth? He said, oh no, Prabhupada wants us to be the rulers of the world. And I thought, whoa, I had just done this campaign. I got 1% of the vote. Balavanta running for mayor got like 100 votes out of 1 million. Hare Krishna is not for everyone. You look at Tulsi Gabbard, there was a campaign yesterday in Phoenix. She got 0.1% of the vote. And she's sincere about Krishna consciousness, as far as I know. But,
From that publicity of you running,
oh yeah.
the person who designed the machines in the slaughterhouses came to the temple and took prasadam.
Wow.
Yeah, because in the publicity I had spoken about cow killing, it has to be stopped if human society is going to make any progress. She designed and manufactured the machines that slaughter the cows. She came to the temple and
Is that Temple Grandin? Temple Grandin?
no. She came to the temple one Sunday feast and we spoke to her. I showed her the point in the passage in Bhagavatam, I think, where it says that for every hair on the body of the cow you kill, you live a life in hell or something.
Wow.
I passed through Phoenix 10 years later and I looked up her name and she was preaching that if you kill the cow by this new method which causes them no pain at all, you will go to heaven. That's how perverse they has become. Of course an animal's being slaughtered. Prabhupada says they know they're going to be killed. The Bhagavatam says that. When you're leading them, you're rounding them up to bring them, the cows are crying and they know this Shudra is certainly going to kill me. You read that passage in Bhagavatam?
Yes.
So yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. There's so many memories in our life, you know. I'm at an age where memory is not sharp like it was, but I told you some of the pastimes, you know, that I remember Prabhupada. The thing is that Prabhupada is a faultless, greatest personality that ever walked the face of the earth. He's available to everyone also, if you're sincere. He said once that, you love me, I will love you. He reciprocates even with the lowest, you know, who am I? You know, what have I done? But he's there. He can appear before you like in clear daylight, in dreams, in his books, through his devotees, in your own intelligence. He giving out the mercy. He's the reservoir of mercy of Krishna, of Lord Chaitanya, and he can give it out. There are many devotees in those early days, you know, we just got off of, you know, whatever, changing from Western to Indian culture, and many devotees were having visions of Prabhupada, Krishna, the spiritual sky. And we were having a lot of experiences where they were realizations. You remember that from the early days, that as you practice, you get realizations? It's not like Krishna is not rewarding us for doing kirtan and talking, glorifying Prabhupada and following what he taught us to do, and stay devoted to his books and his instructions, and we're safe, and he'll be there with us, you know, whenever we need him, really. Not on call, but, you know, call out to him anyway. You know? Otherwise, who are we going to call? Our parent, like Prabhupada once said, my grandparents are gone, my parents are gone, my wife is gone, and it's just me here in Vrindavan with you, Lord Krishna. He came to that point also in his life. Any questions? Any refutation of the honest leelas that I've told.
Would you tell the story about Srila Prabhupada, how he answered Rukmini in the garden in Los Angeles, please?
Yeah. 2
Yeah.
minutes?
I'd say, if we want, we have up to 20 minutes,
So
if we want.
I was always kind of a political rebel where I don't want to follow authorities, but there was a time in New York where the leader was a sannyasi. He kind of fell down, got married to someone who was pretending to be somebody that they weren't, and started doing crazy things like having fish and eggs on the altar plate and everything. And, Prabhupada heard about it, and we were in the garden one night in Los Angeles, and I would bring a book down because I wanted to read particular passages to hear what Prabhupada's commentary was. And this night I brought down devotees in the mode of goodness, devotees on the transcendental platform, devotees in passion, and devotees in ignorance, to see what Prabhupada's commentary would be. This is 3rd Canto Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada brought up the incident of that he was disappointed that nobody protested of what was going on in New York. And so one lady said to him, "But Prabhupada, isn't it true that if we follow your representative, the temple president, the GBC, that we are following you perfectly?" Prabhupada became so angry. He said, "All my disciples are my representatives. If you follow, then you can also be representative." He was so upset with that consciousness that blindly will follow for better or for worse, just like what happened in Berkeley, Rath Yatra, And now it's, it's accelerated to a great, degree, but that happens with the passage of time, that pure religion, that Lord Chaitanya came in 500 years ago, and Krishna was just here a few thousand years before that, and nobody was a Vaishnava. Hardly anybody was really, Krishna conscious. And when Lord Chaitanya came 500 years ago, Srila Prabhupada says that just 100 years back, Bhaktivinoda Thakur had to revive Vaishnavism all over India because even the teachings of Chaitanya were extinct. Even God himself comes within a quick period of time, especially in Kali Yuga, the pure thing is lost. So really happy to see all of you keeping Prabhupada in the center and keeping devotion to his words as best as we can follow them. Whenever I had a doubt about something, I would bring it up to Srila Prabhupada, and I can honestly say that, he understood my point of view, and he agreed with me on many things, that he didn't want our society to become some power structure, some financial thing for profit or adoration or distinction. This is about love of Godhead, pure love of God, and chanting the holy name with deep emotional devotion to the Lord. Everything else is external to that. How many temples, how many students, how much money is coming in. That was never Prabhupada's concern. He was concerned about how many books were getting out to the suffering people of humanity, or how many people were getting to hear the holy name. That was his intention. There were other, more transcendentally political circumstances which, confirm my, conviction that, we either follow Prabhupada or we're we're going to be misled. I got an email yesterday, for example, from one astrological client. She lives in Sedona, Arizona. Sedona is known as a kind of New Age chakra, a spiritual place. But when you say those words, it's 95% Mayavad and, or mental speculation or some kind of yoga, and 10%, devotion. That's my experience anyway. And this person wrote and said, complaining about the politics of America and Trump this, and I know that form is all Maya or illusion, but we're living in the world of form. How am I supposed to deal with this? And Prabhupada delivered us from that atheistic conclusion that spirit is formless, that there is no God, that he can't hear your prayers, he can't eat your offering, he can't accept your love, he can't embrace you, that personalism is fighting even harder now against Mayavadism, which, the extreme side of Mayavadism is, I am God. We are all God. We can do whatever we like. Throw God away. God is dead, as he writes in the Bhagavad Gita. So there's a great need for adherence to Prabhupada and for all of us to try and do what little bit we can for suffering humanity, like Srila Prabhupada did in his life, gloriously. His whole life, pure devotee of God, a Shaktavesh avatar. We were reading in Bhagavatam, was it, 10th canto, that the Shaktavesh avatars are personal expansions of Krishna. They're not sadhana siddhas like us, jivas who are trying to become purified devotees. And when the first time we saw Prabhupada and heard him and saw his energy, even tangibly, materially, we knew this is something divine. Yes.
How did you survive his departure? That's what I'm always wondering about you devotees who were there personally, like in the physical, form there. And how did you survive?
I got kicked out. I was proud to say I'm the first person in California to get kicked out of the ISKCON temple. Sorry, but some things are just too egregious to cooperate with. Like Yashodanandan told me yesterday on the phone, he was the temple president in Vrindavan. And after Srila Prabhupada left in late 77, he and his temple commander ran the temple for a year. And then they got a letter from the GBC that said, you have to build 11 new Vyasasans and put them in the temple next to Srila Prabhupada, because they're 11 pure devotees now. And we heard stories, the day after Prabhupada left. Oh, things are better now because there was one, but now there's 11 of us. Can you imagine seeing yourself on the same level as Prabhupada? It's not like that. It's not an edict by an organization. It's a state of realization that qualifies you. Isn't that the verse in the Gita 4:34? Jnaninas tattva darshana, one who's really in knowledge, he has seen the truth practically. So Yashodanandan was really upset, that this was going on. And I was kicked out for 3 years, so I didn't even see all the ceremonies to all the different gurus, but I saw everybody leaving, my godbrothers going independent. If you go to LA now, that used to be 400 people after Mangalarti walking around the street doing japa. Now you're lucky if you see 4. You know, and some of my friends are 75 years old and they're doing double duty with the deities because there's not a number of people joining and wanting to be initiated in that sense. I mean, all glories to those that are preaching and getting people to chant Hare Krishna. You know, but you know, following Prabhupada, we're very safe. So yeah, I didn't survive as far as being within the organization.
I was not really thinking of organization, but within your heart, you know, the kind of separation and the fact that Prabhupada, you couldn't go in Prabhupada's room anymore, you know, in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Well, I had a lot of friends and still do within ISKCON, you know. They're friends of us. They know Radha is a great devotee. They, you know, they don't see me trying to collect disciples or something like that, you know. So there's a lot of people within the organization. We're still friendly, and
I think Bhaktivedanta means a question like when you were in the hospital diagnosed with your diabetes and Ratneshwari came to tell you that Prabhupada repented, and afterwards, like how you felt, how you dealt with the separation from Shri Prabhupada.
yeah, I'm not an emotional type of person, but I realized that, and I tried that we're going to have to do this on our own, or we're going to have to get our friends together and try and push on the way we know Prabhupada wanted us to do it. You know? I mean, we've been through things even within ISKCON when Prabhupada was here. You know, when the GBC said, you know, go ahead with the steel wheels, you know, Mahodari tells us the information that, you know, that GBC was running ISKCON and dealing heroin at the same time. You know, and the head pujari was importing hash oil from Thailand and making a lot of money off of it. We didn't know these things. We didn't know that there was, I was the temple commander once and I found out that there were two gay guys in the brahmachari ashram that were attacking and raping all the other brahmacharis every night in the brahmachari ashram. I mean, and this was during Srila Prabhupada's presence on earth. You know, so don't be, you know, I wasn't, you know, in illusion that things are going to get better because now we're going to have 11 groups. But I knew it was up to us to do something. Here's a great example. Silochan went independent and stuck with distributing Prabhupada's books for the last 40 years. We don't really, you know, need the buildings. We need the Sangha. We need the association of like-minded devotees. And if some people are encouraged to chant by taking diksha from somebody who's an honest soul, good for them. I mean, you can't expect perfection in Kali Yuga, and you know, when there's this much power and money floating around, honestly speaking. Sorry. Did I offend anybody? I hope not.
I appreciate the spirit and content of your words and your emphasis on we simply follow Srila Prabhupada and we have safe shelter. And I appreciated how you catalyzed Nalinikanta to talk about Mother Jamuna and response. Let us, you know, sure, let us each be inspired by each other, and you know, sincere followers of Prabhupada, and let's each. I mean, this is a theme I got from what you're saying, Nalinikanta Prabhu, that let's each be responsible to know Srila Prabhupada and develop our personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada, and what is the essence and content of Srila Prabhupada's teachings, and let that be our absolute and infallible shelter, and endeavor to associate with others who, well, I like to make this distinction. Like, okay, like I know for myself, I don't in any way endeavor to be a link to Srila Prabhupada. I see my role, and that's what I see you're doing in your life. I see my role to encourage, inspire, support people to develop their direct relationship with Srila Prabhupada, with Srila Prabhupada as their current direct link to the Parampara. And that's how I can fulfill my mission, my attempt to serve Prabhupada's mission, to support people. So like if there was just a complete cataclysm of everything in life, even the person's dearest to us, but I continue with enthusiasm to serve Srila Prabhupada because I understand his mission and his instructions, and I make distinctions about what's Srila Prabhupada and what's a deviation that might look spiritual. So I just encourage everyone to I endeavor to do what I can to inspire people to develop their direct personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada and cultivate that, and that's an infallible shelter.
Nice. And with Prabhupada's philosophy is we also have a direct link to Krishna and a relationship with him through his divine grace. One time in Prabhupada's office upstairs in LA, I asked him a question rather brazenly, big mouth that I am. I said, Srila Prabhupada, even though we're very neophyte devotees, qualifying myself, I said, if we feel a particular relationship with Krishna in a certain way, what is that? Is that Maya, or is that something we should develop and open this? Oh, that is what is wanted. He knows how neophyte fallen soul I am, but still he told me, if you like Krishna in a particular rasa even, you can't imitate that, you can't imagine it, but give your heart to God in love, and that's what we want the devotees to be doing. So you have access to God when you're his devotee.
Yeah, there's a comment there.
I just want to say in answer to Bhakti, how do you deal with Srila Prabhupada's passing in physical presence no longer? Never did he ever say that his physical presence was important. It was always his instructions and his books. And we can personally associate with Srila Prabhupada by following his instructions and by reading his books. That's how we nurture and cultivate that relationship. So that's how we do.
They already have trained everyone to see him in that way.
Exactly.
And in my memory is that even before he departed, he gave us his moti also. So he gave us the vapu and the vani at the same time.
The Prabhupada said that if you want to know me, then read my books. And one time someone came up to Srila Prabhupada and they actually pointed out that he had said something and that it was different than what was in his book. And so he said, what did it say in the book? And then he just said, well, if it was in the book, that's what I mean. Yes, he referred to his own book.
I was on that trip up to Portland. I was reading in the van one of those small books, Easy Journey or Perfection of Yoga, or one of those little books, where Prabhupada was telling a pastime that if a dog is coming and you say hut, it will go away. The next morning on the morning walk, we're in a park in Portland with about 5 sannyasis with their staffs and Prabhupada, and this big Saint Bernard comes bounding down the hill, running right at Prabhupada, and he goes, "Hut!" and it takes off to the left. And I said, Prabhupada reads and follows his own books. Practical example.
This morning, we had our discussion morning program, and this was the theme this morning. And so I sent to about a dozen members of community, most of who are here, an excerpt of a letter that I received from Rupanuga Prabhu in 2017. And Rupanuga, he wrote to me. He said, he wrote, I'm paraphrasing, but it's more or less there. He said there's absolutely, and then Rupanuga writes, that is the correct word. There's absolutely no difference between sitting in front of Prabhupada on 2nd Avenue and hearing Prabhupada's recordings and reading his books. And I know because I've done both. There's absolutely no difference.
You are all practicing it. You feel Prabhupada's presence in your life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the joy of our life, to feel like we pleased our spiritual master. There's nothing that compares to that, really, that feeling that Prabhupada is happy with us. I had that feeling maybe 2 or 3 times in the last 50 years. So. Does that qualify as realization?
It keeps you going. It keeps you going.
Yes.
I'm a little shy to put this forward, but I'm throw it out. I had a dream, and this is one of those dreamy kind of dreams about either Srila Prabhupada. But Srila Prabhupada was in a dream. And there were stalwart devotees. I think they were mostly men. There were stalwart devotees, and I didn't see who they were. I didn't know who they were. But I was standing back and looking at this, and when I woke up from the dream, I realized this is the Sangha that is going on now. And Prabhupada is in with them, and we can tune into that. Wherever they are, whoever they are, doing whatever they're doing, but this is going forward now, and there is a Sangha, and it was just like, it was a mood, it's like that. I just wanted to share that. The same thing goes with Kirtan, like Mangalarti. Every place that there is, we can just tune in. Srila Prabhupada is present with, all over the world. We can call devotees that have departed. Who cares? We can call Jayananda, all these devotees that Prabhupada loved. We can bring them. Devotees that are here, we can bring them. They're there with our Sangha. When we're reading, not only are the members of the Bhagavatam there, but also the devotees, we call them. They're devotees that are living this all over the world and interplanetary. With Srila Prabhupada now. We're not alone. Excuse me. It's a vision.
And he sits at the right hand of the Father. He's with Krishna. All access, backstage pass, everything. I can tell a dream quickly I had once. Who knows a pastime in the Mahabharata where Hanuman was blocking the road of Bhima and told him, just move my tail? You know that pastime? So one night I had a dream where 2 other devotees were climbing, going in the mountains. It seemed like the Himalayas. There was a big monkey on the pathway. And he said, who are you and where are you going? I said, we're going up to the mountain to read the books of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. He moved his tail and said, oh, go right ahead. Prabhupada is worshipped by all of the great personalities throughout history. He's incredibly appreciated for bringing the Yuga Dharma to this universe, to this planet. Everybody will, everybody, all of them Narad, yes, all of them will appreciate you, or are appreciating your being devoted to Srila Prabhupada. He's such a great person.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Panchakapa Divyascha. Would you like to kirtan and prasad? Okay. Would you like to lead the kirtan?
I read one already.
Who do you think should lead the kirtan? Okay. Who's not here?
Ryan's here, down the corner.
Okay.
Okay, I'll tell him.
You're being here.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, like sharing
If you want to lead the kirtan. Jai Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada ki jai. Om Vishnu Pad Mahamsa Prabhupada ki jai. Divine Grace. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada Vishnu Pad Mahamsa Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Divine Grace. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Anant Koti Vaishnava ki jai. Srila Das Thakur ki jai. Bring to Kusi Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Vedanta Shiva Sarikar Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Chandra Radha Govardhan ki jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Navki Madhur ki jai, Navki Bunmai ki jai, Tulasi Devi ki jai, Riyat Mridanga ki jai, Hari Nam Sankirtan ki jai, Krishna Mahamantra ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai. Bhagavat Prasada ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Guru Hare Krishna. Please have a seat and we'll serve prasadam prepared by Ladini Shakti Dasi and Ramachandra Das and some special prasad cookies from Jan and famous prasad cookies. Prasadam ki
Sit down. Sit down. Oh, nice. Okay, guys.
Are you ready? Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, my kids help you with this. Stop doing that. Okay, I'll make you one. You want this plate? Yeah. I'll make you a special. It's for you. Yeah, no, That's applicated. It's like, okay, I heard this all my life. I see it. I see. How you look at doing that? How much is Yeah. Come sit right here. You want your water? You need your water, okay?
Yeah, in the moment that it takes like 24 seconds of awareness. And eventually get into myself. It can be really challenging, but
So easy to fall into like.
I don't want you to eat on the plate.
It's so counterproductive and showing up. Yeah, I really like the on the plate. Well, to begin with, my introduction to Christian is really experience of Karna and Joseph. I can do that too, but she had her yeah, exactly. So she actually in high school and met about to perception of conventional consideration in some cases yeah, Tyler. I was watching a video. Tyler? Okay, yeah, I got it. Yeah, thank you.
Today around 1:30.
I just couldn't think last night. Just like, I messed this up. I was like, we're teaching, so it's like, we're teaching. And then we're so relaxed. After being in school, like I had a master's degree. Yeah, it does, man. I'm just saying so much more now. It's like not officially, but it's that's what they want. Especially if you're not like I'm like, who cares if it's official or not? But only the spirit of that thing. Okay, yeah. Exactly.
Rebecca, sorry, I thought they were like all out. Like very profitable, but they're coming. Okay, great. No, but he might not even know. I'm like, I'm experienced. I'm just like, oh, that's interesting.
we're comfortable. Disconnected somehow. It's like I'm getting the results that I'm supposed to be getting. I'm trying to reject it. Because that's when I think about it, it's like,
Can you try your popsicle? Let's be with you. It's really good. It's like fried bread.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
What are you doing? I'm actually gonna turn this off. Okay.